So welcome back to chapter 4, and now we're into part 2 of 3. Chapter 4 is a big chapter. I know the last video was a big one, so congratulations on getting as far as you guys are going. You guys are doing awesome. As you can see, the more we start talking about consent, the more there is to seem to keep learning and practicing. So the fact that you are, practicing it all and learning it all and taking this all in is amazing. And I'm so glad you're doing this. You guys are going to make the world a better place, and you're going to be better people. And hopefully you're going to go out and spread the word and get everyone on the same page. And the future will be brighter than it's ever been. These are my hopes and dreams for all of you. So this brings us now to part 2, which is on healthy relationships. And healthy relationships, as we mentioned, are sort of that underpinning foundation for consent. When we are in healthy and respectful, communicative relationships, that is where we're most likely to be on that top floor of that house with those 3 layers. And that's where consent happens, when we feel safe, when we feel respected, when we feel heard. That's where intimacy can actually happen. So that's what we want. So we want to know what healthy looks like. And then we also kind of need to know what unhealthy looks like. So we'll talk about that at the end. So there's, this is a very big topic. We're not going to cover every single element of healthy kinds of options for relationships. We're going to talk about 2 very important parts, as they have to do with safety, and they have to do with how we feel in our ability to communicate, because communication is where consent comes from. So the first part of this in relationships is what we talk about around trust. When we trust someone, we feel safe with them. When we feel safe, we can communicate about consent. When we don't, it gets harder. We're getting into that second floor, often kind of feeling sometimes where we're not quite sure, we're not quite safe. So trust, for this, we're going to use the work of one of my favorite people in the world. If you haven't heard of her yet, her name is Brené Brown. She is fantastic. If you look up her TED Talks, she has some amazing stuff on vulnerability, shame, different things like this. And this is one of hers that she talks around. Her research broke down what trust actually is, because trust is actually a very complicated topic. And it has, in fact, she learned 7 different parts to it. So that's a lot of different parts. So when we say trust, we want to know what we're actually talking about. Because when we know what we're actually talking about, we can tell if we have this with a partner or potential partner or not. So she uses an acronym called BRAVING. So each of those letters of the word stands for a different element of trust. And the first one is what we just talked about. The B stands for boundaries. So trust in a relationship is boundaries are respected and communicated. So we can each say, this is what's okay for me, this is what's not okay for me. And the other person says, cool, thanks for letting me know. I'm glad we were able to have this talk. Not trying to push past them, not trying to move that boundary, not trying to belittle or make fun of someone or any other type of response to a boundary that's been set. So boundaries is part of trust, part of healthy relationships. The next letter is R. R stands for reliability. Reliability is our ability to say what we're going to do and do what we're going to say, that we're reliable when we said we're going to be there, within reason. Life happens, but more or less when you say, hey, yeah, I'll call you this weekend, you call this weekend. Or, I'll meet you for dinner at 7, you're there roughly around 7, pretty close, right? So this reliability thing is something that actually builds trust between people. The A is what stands for accountability. Accountability is our ability to say and take ownership for kind of also times when we screw up. So I did say I was going to call you this week and I totally forgot. It was my grandmother's birthday. It's my bad. That's my fault. I really apologize. I own that. I understand that you're angry at me, and I'm hoping that you can forgive me. That's accountability. That's taking ownership for when you screw up or some of your own stuff. The V then stands for what she kind of cutely calls the vault. The vault is a sort of a metaphor for that sense of safety for personal information. So if you tell me something, that stays in the vault. So personal information, you're like, hey, listen, I really don't want this shared around, but this is what's going on for me. And I go, you got it, not leaving the vault. That's what builds trust. Now, it's not just between people, it's also actually from the outside in. So let's say Jenny told me something and I then tell you, but Jenny told me not to, but I'm like, listen, she said not to say anything, but like, here's this thing. Even if I never share your stuff, even if our vault's never broken, the fact that I shared Jenny's stuff out of that vault actually breaks down trust between you and me, because you're watching me break trust with someone else. Your brain's going, how do I know she's not going to do that with me? Okay, so the vault is both between and external with personal information. Obviously, if safety is a concern and you're sharing information, listen, so-and-so, told me she's not feeling safe, and she told me not to tell anyone. Those aren't secrets we keep. Safety is always something we talk to trusted people about, hopefully adults who can help with that. Other than that, though, we're trying to keep those information where they were placed in our confidence. Then the I stands for integrity. Integrity is our ability to act and behave and react with integrity at all times, whether we are hungry, tired, cranky, whatever. We're not suddenly treating someone completely different than before. We're not, pleasant and lovely with someone so long as we're in a good mood. But as soon as we're a bit ticked at them, we call them names and we, tell them they're stupid and we dismiss them. That's our integrity with that person isn't consistent. And so it breaks down trust. The N stands for non-judgment. Non-judgment is, of course, when someone tells us something, we're not like, ew, oh my God, why do you think that? Or like, yo, buddy, that's like totally lame. Why do you like that? Whatever, sports team or whatever. So if you've got that kind of response, a judging response to someone, that breaks down trust, and vice versa. And then the G stands for generosity. Generosity is the ability to first assume the best before we assume the worst. So if someone said they were going to call on the weekend, and they're normally pretty good, but then they didn't this time, instead of being like, oh my God, they hate me, or they're a horrible friend, or, they're a horrible partner, we're not going to jump to that conclusion. We're first going to assume there was probably something important that happened. We should probably find out what really is going on first, because we know this person, we like them, and we think they're a good person. And obviously, if we get information that proves that wrong, we'll deal with that if it comes. But for now, we assume the best until we learn otherwise, if that's the case. So each of these elements with a partner can help show us ways to have that trust. And if we're engaging with a partner emotionally, romantically, or physically, and some of these pieces are missing, that can actually start to trigger stuff, whether we're aware of it or not, that might make us feel unsafe and can make it harder for us to express what we're truly thinking, truly feeling, truly wanting, so that each part of hot spice, our ability to be honest from our own inventory to our partner. So we want to really be aware of that. Sometimes as a prerequisite before we sometimes think about becoming vulnerable with a person, because sex and sexual intimacy is actually quite a vulnerable thing, right? We're usually alone with a person, usually closed doors, usually not anyone around to always call for help if we need it. So we do actually want to make sure we trust someone before we step into those vulnerable situations with them as best we can. So that's around the idea of trust. Now, the second part we kind of talk about is around this idea of conflict resolution and how conflicts take place. Again, unfortunately, we don't often have very healthy models in TV and in movies, because healthy relationships don't always make for great television, unfortunately. So when we sometimes look at models of healthy relationships and we turn to examples we might see, and when we see people fighting or arguing or having these certain interactions as just common and that's just the way things are, it doesn't necessarily actually always have to be that way. So what we turn to here is research from another very cool group of people, the Gottmans, a husband and wife team, did a whole bunch of research actually on married folks. And they looked at different relationships dynamics that both had people staying married and had people divorcing. So we're going to use that in broader terms here, because it turns out it's not just within marriages that these things are important. It's actually in any relationship. But specifically, when we look at sort of emotional, physical, romantic relationships, these types of communication dynamics are really important to make sure we're doing the healthy way, the way that doesn't end up with people getting divorced or in problems, right? Because divorce is a good representation of things weren't working and they weren't feeling safe, weren't feeling good. People aren't feeling on that top floor on that comfy couch together where they want to hang out and spend time together. Usually they're somewhere in that second floor of activated, not feeling safe, whatever it might be, or sometimes shut down all the way. So we want to be in that top floor. So we're going to use this. So the Gottmans talk about sort of 4 problems and 4 solutions to those problems. And the 4 problems that show up in communication are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And these each mean sort of different things. So criticism is when we just sort of blanket fire at someone a global statement about their crappiness. So if there's a specific situation, let's imagine, you went to a party with a partner and that person left you to go outside and hang out with their friends and just said they were going to be a minute, and then they disappeared and you couldn't get in touch with them, and it was this whole thing. A criticism would be, you never say what you're going to do. You never think of me first. You always put your friends first. So some of the key words for criticisms are always and never. Those tend to not be helpful when we're communicating with a partner about a concern. So criticisms, not good. They break down communication. They make the other person feel attacked, and they don't really solve anything because they're not addressing anything solvable. They're just stating that you're an awful person and I don't like you right now, which doesn't help. The solution that the Gottmans talk about is what they call a gentle startup and a complain without blame. So a gentle startup is if you have a concern or complaint with a partner, something didn't go right, like at this party, you would say, hey, listen, there's something that's been on my mind and I thought it through and it's still really bothering me and I'd like to talk about it with you. And then you kind of roll into the thing. So you're gently starting up. You're letting the person know we're about to have a bit of a tough conversation. This is hard. Let's do it together, though. Then the complain without blame is not this global, you're this, you're that, whatever. It's about saying, listen, you did say that you were going to, come back in a few minutes. It really hurt me that you made me feel like I wasn't important. That's how I felt when that happened, right? So you're trying to talk about how your experience was. So the other person can sort of reflect. And hopefully you're offering a solution. This wasn't cool for me. This really wasn't a cool thing that happened for us. Here's what I'd like to see happen next time. What do you think? And you offer your suggestion. Okay, so now that's one problem, one solution. They kind of go hand in hand. Down a level, if these things keep going, so let's say someone does criticize, usually the next thing to happen is defensiveness. Someone says, you always put your friends ahead of me. You don't like me at all. You're so rude. You're so whatever. The person defensively would usually say something like, it was this one time, last time I was this, that, and the other thing. And don't you remember last week you actually did this, that, da, da, da. So you're kind of fluffing away their concerns, and then you're usually turning it around on the other person. Well, you this, and well, you that. We're still not solving anything. We're now just fighting with each other for reasons, emotional reasons, right? They're important reasons, but they're not being dealt with in a way that's actually moving us towards anything helpful. So beginning with the end in mind, what do we want is the result. So instead of defensiveness, the solution is what's called accepting responsibility. This isn't like you're completely right, I'm completely wrong necessarily, but it's saying, hey, I can see what you're saying. I can see how that maybe felt for you. It wasn't what I intended, but I apologize that I didn't text you and tell you what was up because there was actually this really important thing and right? Who knows what the story was? So that's where communication can actually open up when you're not sort of just battering at each other. So that's the next problem solution. Now, if we were to keep going, criticism, the other person gets defensive. A lot of times, the very next thing that happens is the last one, or the second last one, of contempt. Contempt is when we basically kind of forget that we actually like the person we're talking to. We've usually slid into a second floor response of fight or flight, and we've disconnected emotionally, and we've gone into eye rolling and, oh, here we go again. And you're always, drama train is showing up. You get this rolling contempt thing showing up, which is very disrespectful, and you're really very far away from your partner. No healthy communication is happening. The solution to contempt, if either person feels they're starting to eye roll and, oh God, here we go again, that kind of feeling, is to try to refocus on your connection. Try to remind yourself to get back into that top floor of the house of why you actually do like this person. Why are you hanging out with them? Why did you choose to date them? Why are you still dating them, or talking with them, or whatever you're doing? So you can reconnect, so you can get back to those more respectful ways of communicating with a partner. The last one is called stonewalling. This is the last problem. What it looks like is one person shutting down. You're not talking anymore. You are just blocking them out, cold shoulder, maybe even blocking on text or email or whatever messenger stuff. This isn't very healthy because now communication's already shut down. There's a difference between stonewalling and taking space. Taking space can be healthy with communication. Hey, I'm getting a little too worked up right now. I need to go take a quick walk. That's okay. That's healthy. That's good. What we want to do as the solution to stonewalling, instead of just digging in deeper into blocking, shutting off, cold shoulder, not responding, is to actually do what's called self-soothing, or we might call it just like deep breathing or going for a walk, something that calms you down. We're trying to come back up from that second floor fight or flight, because this stonewalling is actually second or sometimes bottom floor response. We've shut down, we've removed, we're overstimulated emotionally and physically. We need to breathe, we need to go for a walk, we need to play with a pet, we need to do something that helps us to come back up to that top floor where we can actually use our language and our logical part of our brain on the top floor of that house again, so that we're safe. So that's your 4 problems, 4 solutions of healthy relationships, a way to make sure you're actually in a healthy relationship. So of course, speaking of these healthy possibilities, we need to also know what unhealthy looks like. If we find ourselves in unhealthy, we need to be able to accept that might be the case. Even if things started out great and things were perfect and beautiful and fairy tale for the first, couple days or weeks or months even, if it changes, we have to be able to accept that new information when it shows up. So I have about 12 different things that can be signs. It's not exhaustive of a list, but it's pretty inclusive. The first one is jealousy. This is really normalized in our society that it's normal to be jealous. I think there's a song out there right now about it, even, that jealousy is normal. Yes, it's a normal emotion, but how you then make a partner responsible for what you might be dealing with is not always healthy. So if you're telling someone that they're not allowed to see or talk to certain people, or if your partner's telling that to you, those are generally, there's always exceptions depending on circumstance, but pretty much usually those are red flags. So insecurity as another sign of, I need you to be there, or call me or text me every moment, every 5 minutes, like, where are you? That sort of insecurity that breeds into something you now have to do to keep the other person regulated all the time. That can be a very unhealthy sign of a relationship, swinging too far into a ownership or a other way of making you not feel as a independent person who's able to have their own life, coming together with another healthy, independent person in a mutually beneficial, happy, healthy kind of relationship. A third sign is anything to do with isolation. If you are ever told that you, again, can't see certain people, you can't leave the house, you can't go certain places, those, again, are usually without question unhealthy red flags. Number 4 would be false accusations. So accusing someone of cheating, unless obviously this is what's happening, but pretty much accusing and regularly accusing. You flirted with him, you flirted with her, you flirted with that person. You just want to do this or that with them. You don't even care about me. These types of accusations of telling a person what they're doing that actually are not founded in anything, and that are regular, repeated, and tend to be sort of across all genders or all types of people that this person might have that insecurity about. Number 5 is something called gaslighting. Gaslighting is a term, I think it's from a movie actually, but it's a term that's become normalized. That means a person does something that's not okay, and then makes you feel like you're the crazy person for thinking it wasn't okay. So, if some person, let's say you found pictures, nude pictures on their phone, maybe, of someone that they're clearly in a relationship with outside of you, and you made an agreement with that person that you weren't going to do that. You guys were exclusive. Back to our types of relationships. This was an exclusive, monogamous relationship. And here are pictures of this person that clearly this isn't okay. Gaslighting would be if that person then tells you, well, you shouldn't have been looking at my phone anyway. You're overreacting. You don't even know what you're talking about. They try to make you feel like you're the crazy one for whatever is happening. So usually if you call out one of these other items that we're talking about with unhealthy, and they make you feel like you're crazy for thinking it's unhealthy, that's gaslighting. Name calling would be number 6. Obviously, that's not cool. That's not a nice way to treat someone, especially someone that you're supposed to care about and be intimate and vulnerable with, emotionally, romantically, or physically. 7 would be explosive anger. Again, anger is a normal, natural human emotion. What we do with it is our responsibility. Just because we feel angry doesn't mean we get license to explode on a person, to call names, to, throw things. That's not healthy, not okay. So explosive anger, anytime another person's made to feel scared for their physical safety by a partner, that would be an unhealthy, big unhealthy sign. Not okay. We probably shouldn't be in that relationship. Additionally, number 8 would be physical harm. Pushing, shoving, biting, kicking, anything that's physical pain done from one partner to another in an unsafe, unhealthy way. We need to not be in this relationship anymore. That is a firm, no excuse. Doesn't matter if you were, someone was under an influence of a drug or an alcohol or anything. Doesn't actually matter. Still not okay under any circumstances, ever. Number 9 is possessive behavior. It's sometimes related to the isolation, insecurity, jealousy stuff. But this can often sound like, no one will ever love you as much as I love you. You'll never find anyone like me. I'm the only person who'll ever, think you're worth spending time with. Like they're ways of sort of making you feel like, is this a good thing that they're saying it? It's not. They're trying to isolate you and kind of emotionally trap you in a way that's not cool or not safe. Number 10, tracking your phone or tracking you, unless you have an agreement. I know a lot of people do this these days just as like an interesting, oh, what are you up to thing. If that's the nature of it, cool, and you've agreed on it. But if it's like you're not where you said you were going to be one day, and then they like accuse you about it and like interrogate you and, well, where were you? Like if it starts to become like a tracking thing, that's usually starting to be a red flag, and not an okay thing. Number 11, controlling what you do, the clothes that you wear. You can't wear that out. You can't do this. You can't say that. Don't speak, telling you what you can and can't do. That's a controlling thing that's not okay. And number 12, of course, is pressure. So pressure to do things that you don't want to do, pressure to especially sexual or physical things. And sometimes that can be a slow creep over time if it's a longer relationship that's unhealthy of, come on, you said you would, 2 weeks later. It's like, it doesn't have to be in the moment, one after the other, but any type of influence often using an emotional piece of pressure. If you loved me, you would. For the record, the response to that is, if you loved me, you wouldn't keep asking and you'd respect what I am telling you. So that's some of the red flags. Again, this is all also in the book, the Real Talk About Sex and Consent book. If you want that sort of all there for you, all laid out. And there's also some really good resources online. You can Google and read a little bit more about this too. If you do find yourself in something like this, please reach out. Tell someone, tell a teacher, a parent, a trusted person. Ideally, an adult. I know the first person we usually want to tell is our best friend or our buddy or, someone that's a peer sometimes, but our peers often don't have the awareness of really what to do either with this stuff at this stage. So try to reach out to someone who can actually give you some advice and help you out to get to a safe kind of place with this. Now, the next thing we're going to, there's also your handout for this one. So you can fill out that's your braving stuff. So what does each of the acronyms sort of stand for? And how does it mean to you to treat a partner in that way? And then there's your 4 problems, 4 solutions. And then each of those sort of 12 things we just went through in a relationship on this side. And then asking yourself here of what you would do if you found yourself in something with someone who these 12 signs or some of these, even a couple, are starting to show up. Especially I want you to think about, what do you do when this is a person that you love or that you have maybe dated for, let's say, 6 months, a year or longer, and you really invested a lot of time with this person and now these signs are showing up? What would you do? Okay. So trying to do those as well. And then in part 3, we're going to do the big, pulling all the big pieces in, putting it all together, taking what we know about the brain body, taking what we know about legal consent, signs of consent, and now some of this stuff around safety and interpersonal stuff, breaking down those myths and influences, putting it in this big bubble. We're going to put it all together. Okay. So join me over there next, and I will see you in part 3 real soon.